Hello. We'll see if this is going now. I'm giving it another try this morning, trying to go Facebook Live, but the computer keeps crashing or keeps bumping me off. I don't know what's going on with that. So I switched to a different computer and see if I can set this up, see if that helps any better. Computers and I have a love-hate relationship, mostly hate. Um, I just It's just so frustrating when machines don't do what machines are supposed to do. And I don't want to become a computer programmer just to get something very simplistic done. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if I get kicked off again. So today I want to discuss resources that are available on my consulting website. Uh, the the resources, um, the fundamental issue is you need mental health support. Okay, so I know parents are very interested. What can I do to solve things? Well, it's not your role to solve things regarding this severity of pathology. That's why we get mental health people in. They need to diagnose the pathology and they need to effectively treat it. The Now, normally, under normal circumstances, I would have arrived 10 years ago and referred parents into your local mental health resources for appropriate assessment, diagnosis, and treatment. But I couldn't do that here because of forensic psychology. You've been given your own special psychologists, and they are the worst imaginable. They're immensely ignorant, incompetent, unethical, and lazy. They just don't care. And so I recognize that, and I've been taking steps to address it. Uh, Ultimately, I was hoping things would move a little bit faster with them, but they're not. So it's gone all the way to completion, where now I'm in the family courts testifying and doing second opinion consults on the forensic custody evaluations and reunification reports, stuff like that. And so we'll see what they answer to the critique of their profession, forensic psychology. I have blogs up and on my website, various locations, you can go and look at my critique of child custody evaluations. Fundamentally, they violate multiple ethical standards of practice. They are entirely worthless. They solve nothing, and they're not valid um, assessments of anything. They're just one person's opinion. And we need a diagnosis with this pathology. The differential diagnosis for severe attachment pathology, which is what this is, problems in the love and bonding system, the differential diagnosis is child abuse by one parent or the other. Either the targeted parent is abusing the child, creating the child's attachment pathology towards that parent. That's a two-person attribution of causality. Or the allied parent is psychologically abusing the child by creating a shared persecutory delusion and a false attachment pathology in the child to manipulate the court's decisions around child custody and to meet the parent's own emotional and psychological needs. That's a three-person triangular attribution of causality. So we have a two-person or three-person, it goes one way or the other, and either direction it goes, it's child abuse. We got child abuse by the targeted parent or psychological child abuse by the allied parent. So we have a differential diagnosis of child abuse that needs a proper risk assessment in all cases. So I recommend that the courts, very early in the process, as soon as they recognize that this is going to be a highly litigated custody conflict surrounding the child, they need to bump it out to get a proper risk assessment and diagnosis for mental health to that appropriate differential diagnosis for each parent. Is it psychological abuse by the targeted parent, or is it child abuse by the targeted parent, or psychological child abuse by the allied parent? Um, that should happen really quickly. A typical diagnosis could be returned within like 4 to 6 weeks. The child custody evaluations take 6 to 9 months. They do not return a diagnosis. So that even after them, we still need a diagnosis of what's going on in the family. And we need a proper risk assessment for possible child abuse, and they didn't conduct it. Fundamentally, we need to know whether it's a shared persecutory delusion, and they need to step up and answer that question. Yes, no, maybe. But we need an answer on that question. Because if it's child abuse one direction, we have to protect from the targeted parent. If it's psychological child abuse the other direction, we have to protect from the allied parent. So one way or the other, we have duty to protect obligations. But the forensic evaluation, 6 to 9 months, don't return a diagnosis. So we still need a risk assessment, a diagnostic risk assessment, even after the forensic evaluation. So they're pretty pointless, $20,000 to $40,000. Basically, it's just the financial exploitation of vulnerable parents. You're looking for mental health input. You're only given one choice, the forensic psychologist, because clinical psychologists have left. They've abandoned you. This pathology in the court system is too professionally dangerous. So that's the forensic psychology response. We've given you your own special psychologist because you're too dangerous to our license. So fundamentally, we need to stop the fighting around the child. That's destructive for the child. It rips the child apart. It destroys the child's childhood, all this fighting around the child. And it solves nothing. It's extraordinarily expensive in the family courts. And it threatens the license of psychologists, so we leave. So you have no treatment people over here. I'm taking some seminars right now from clinical psychology people. It's very refreshing to get back into these, where people value knowledge and they're applying knowledge. And it's like water to a thirsty psychologist here to be back among my own. The problem is, I recognize none of them have ever worked in child custody conflict because no clinical psychologists do. It's too dangerous to their license. So I'll be taking a seminar and they have no clue as to what's going on in the family courts, and they don't care. They're just not coming here. So that we have to make it safer over here. And the way we do that is by a standard application of knowledge, so that all psychologists are applying the same knowledge to reach the same conclusions and the same recommendations. And that we can't do that with the construct of parental alienation that's been around for 40 years, because that just creates more conflict. There's no definition of that. The definition that's provided, those 8 Gardner symptoms, are absolutely atrocious. It doesn't solve anything. And it's been rejected by the American Psychiatric Association. Rightly so. It's a terrible diagnostic model. And so that just creates more conflict. It's created by the pathology specifically for that purpose. And so my recommendation to all mental health professionals is that that term should not be used in a professional capacity. The term or the construct of parental alienation is substantially beneath professional standards of practice to use in a professional capacity. Apply other knowledge. Apply shared delusional disorder, factitious disorder imposed on another. You apply cross-generational coalition, emotional cutoff. There's a number of psychological control, number of professional constructs that are applicable. Don't use parental alienation. It's just a destructive construct. And if you do as a parent, there's nothing I can do to help you. You're going down a very bad path. That's not going to lead to a solution. But what we need to do is we need to get back to actual professional clinical practice. The forensic psychologists that you've been assigned to, given, are ignorant like a rock, and that's going to pose problems for you, because now you have to explain the pathology to the doctor. That should never, ever happen. Uh, go into a medical problem and you have to explain your medical problem to the doctor, how to diagnose it. No, they should already know, and they should be explaining it to you. But they're not, and that's a serious problem. So I'll be addressing that among my own. At some point, they're going to have to address the serious issues that I raise regarding child custody evaluations. In the meantime, though, parents have obligations to protect your child. Your child's life is being destroyed by the pathology of the other parent, and so you need to do things. I would suggest when you're working with the mental health professionals or mental health people around you, I don't think there's a whole lot of professionals at this point, but the mental health people, is to be careful that they don't assume that they're there to help you, don't assume that they are smart or that they're going to recognize the pathology. And so you can't be assertive to them. If you assert your rights, and you face potential retaliation from the mental health people. And that should also never ever happen when you assert your rights for stuff. They shouldn't retaliate against you, but they do. So some of the recommendations I'll be giving you, proceed with caution. I suggest that you present yourself as a vulnerable parent who is hurting, who is missing your child. Give them the problem of how do I fix it with my child, and try to stay away from assertions because that could be dangerous for you. So I came over here about a decade ago, about 2010, and worked out most everything by 2012 with the personality pathology and family systems and delusional trauma pathology. In 2015, I published a book that describes it, an attachment-based model of parental alienation called Foundations, which we rest. And it's not a new theory. It's the application of established scientific and professional knowledge of the discipline to the pathology we have. It analyzes and describes the pathology at 3 levels of analysis: family systems, constructs, cross-generational coalition, emotional cutoff; at personality disorder processes, narcissistic, borderline, parent collapsing into delusional beliefs; and then at the attachment system perspective, disorganized attachment and the transgenerational transmission of attachment trauma, as well as integrating them across all 3 levels. So the attachment pathology causes the personality pathology, which causes the family systems pathology. So it is an accurate description of the pathology, fine-grained detail. There's no description that can move across, in 3 separate description across 3 separate domains of applied knowledge, and that integrates all 3 domains of applied knowledge. So I am a clinical psychologist. I worked out how to efficiently diagnose the pathology, because that's a problem that these mental health people are going to face. The clinical psychologists haven't been in the family courts for 40 years. So they're going to have to get oriented, but it's a dangerous world to get oriented in. So they need some sort of structured way to be able to come back and get their feet back into the family courts. And the forensic psychologists need to stop doing what they're doing and diagnose the pathology, but they're ignorant and incompetent in trauma and attachment pathology and delusional thought disorders and family systems. And so one of my favorite sayings, don't try to teach a pig to sing. It just frustrates you and annoys the pig. And teaching the forensic psychologists how to assess and diagnose this is teaching a pig to sing. They're lazy, and that's a fundamental problem. If you're not lazy, and they're unethical, and so why would we want lazy and unethical psychologists working here anyway? However, the longer the forensic psychologist has been in the family courts, the worse they are. So maybe the newer ones that are just arriving have not been as corrupted by the exploitation of parents and stuff, and maybe more open to applying knowledge. So what I did back in 2015, 2016, once I described the pathology, I identified 3 diagnostic indicators because I have professional expertise in a variety of relevant domains, 6 of them. There's delusional thought disorders, attachment pathology, complex trauma and child abuse, factitious disorder imposed on another, family systems therapy, and court-involved family custody conflict. And all of those are documented by my Vita. You can go up to my consulting website, Dr. Childress-consulting, attorney section, attorney resource page, and there's a handout on my specialized expertise domains. So because I know what the pathology is and wrote the book describing it across 3 different levels, integrated and all that, I identified 3 symptoms that will always be present when the shared delusional disorder attachment pathology that I describe in Foundations is present. The first is that the child will be rejecting a normal range parent. Okay? Attachment system suppression towards a normal range parent. That's diagnostic indicator 1. That puts it in the attachment domain, the love and bonding. It's not ADHD, it's not autism, it's not an eating disorder, it's an attachment pathology. The second feature about that symptom is it's an impossible symptom. That children do not reject a normal range parent because the attachment system is a primary motivational system of the brain. It is a goal-corrected motivational system, meaning it always maintains the set goal of forming an attachment bond to the parent. Now, people may make the argument that, oh, that parent's abusive, so therefore the child's trying to protect themselves by severing the bond. Doesn't actually happen in child abuse, but even if we entertain that idea, the child is showing an attachment suppression towards a normal range parent. That targeted parent's not abusive. And so if the targeted parent's not abusive, the child wants to bond to that parent, the motivation's towards that parent. So that's an impossible symptom if present, a child rejecting a normal range parent. Now, the question becomes, how do you determine whether the targeted parent is a normal range parent? And we need to end the fighting around the child because that's just ripping the child apart. So we need to bring that fighting to a close. So there's argument about whether or not the targeted parent is abusing the child, as an abusive parent. So what I did to answer that was I came up with this worksheet, a little checklist called the Parenting Practices Rating Scale. And it's up on my website, and I'll talk about this. That basically breaks parenting down into 4 levels. Abusive level, really close to abusive level, not quite, but really severe, very hostile, aggressive parenting or something. Making the child stand in stress position, something like that. Then problematic parent, but normal range problematic parent. And parents aren't perfect humans, but it's normal range parenting. And then normal range and healthy parenting, so levels 1, 2, 3, and 4. If the parent is levels 3 and 4, they're normal range. If they're 1 and 2, they're abusive range. And what I recommend that all parents do is get your involved mental health professional to rate you on this parenting practices rating scale. And it's just their judgment. They talk to you about how you parent, they talk to your child about how you parent, what's going on, and rate you. And it's very specific. It gets specific on like the type of parenting So for a level 3 problem, you might be an uninvolved parent, disinterested, lack of involvement with the child, emotionally disengaged, something like that. It's normal range, but that's the problem. Is you tend to be more disengaged with the child, and so they ask them to rate you where your parenting is, because if it's problematic, let's put it on a treatment plan and fix it, and then that should fix the problem, right? And if it's not problematic, then you cannot be causing the child's attachment pathology. So this is designed for the mental health people to rate you, the targeted parent, and that gives a clear piece. Now, if we want to fight about that, we can fight about it, but we have clarity as to what the assertion is about your parenting, and then we can get examples that support it, or there's no examples to support it. And that's typically what we would do, is we would identify and then offer some examples about why we say you're in that level or that domain. And then that can serve with the courts and with future mental health people and everybody to document where people think your parenting is. And that ties to diagnostic indicator 1, attachment suppression towards a normal range parent. The second diagnostic indicator is high protest behavior. Now, the high protest behavior can either be high angry, excessive angry, or excessive anxiety. Now, these first two diagnostic indicators are actually reflecting John Bowlby's first 2 volumes. Attachment, volume 1, is symptom 1, that it's a child rejecting a normal range parent. Children don't reject a normal range parent because the attachment system is a primary motivational system of the brain that is a goal-corrected motivational system, always maintains a set goal of forming an attachment bond to the parent. So that's number 1. Bowlby's volume 2, separation, anxiety and anger, those are the protest behaviors, or those are the symptoms of separation, anxiety and anger. So here we're looking at excessive degrees of anxiety and anger. Now, how do we operationally define that? Because we want to stop fighting about stuff. So how do we define what the high anger and high anxiety is? Well, I chose 5 narcissistic personality traits as the symptom features for high anger. The child's judgmental, grandiose and judgmental, sense of entitlement, haughty and arrogant attitude, absence of empathy, which is the capacity for cruelty, and splitting, all good, all bad. The 2 important symptoms off of that are the absence of empathy, the capacity for cruelty, and the splitting. The splitting is very characteristic. It's a neurologically based symptom, and it's all good or all bad. There's no ambivalence, no shades of gray in anything. It's also very rigid thinking. So when the child says, nothing will ever change, it's done and this is forever and ever, that's an example of the cognitive rigidity associated with splitting. And splitting is a symptom feature of only 2 pathologies. It's not a symptom feature of ADHD. It's not a symptom of eating disorders or autism. It's a symptom of personality pathology, narcissistic and borderline personality pathology. So splitting is a very important symptom to identify, as well as the absence of empathy. We never want to see absence of empathy in a child, because that's the capacity for cruelty. And so when I'm assessing empathy, with a child, I don't actually assess directly, do you feel what your parent feels? I assess their capacity for cruelty. So I might say, wow, that's really being mean to your mom there saying that, and see how they respond to that. If they kind of ripple to it and kind of go, and get a little uncomfortable with being cruel, that's a good thing. If they just say, yeah, she deserves it because, and that she deserves it is the spousal abuse theme. Yeah, of course I hit her because she deserved it. My dinner was cold. So it's the capacity for cruelty. So I chose 5 narcissistic traits displayed by the child. That too is an impossible symptom, because 5 is the number for a DSM diagnosis of a personality disorder. And children don't have personality disorders. Children don't have personalities that are quite formed yet. In childhood, what will later become a personality disorder is actually attachment pathology. It'll show up in the attachments system, not personality pathology. Because children are growing, maturing, their personality is still in flux. During young adulthood, the personality coalesces, and the attachment disorder underneath that coalesces into the narcissistic and borderline personality traits. But you don't see a personality disorder in the child. But here I have a child with 5 narcissistic personality traits. How did a 10, 12-year-old child get a narcissistic personality disorder? Because of the influence of an adult who has the narcissistic personality traits. It's from psychological control of the child. And so I call it the psychological fingerprints of control by a narcissistic parent. So it's the parent, the narcissistic parent, who has a sense of entitlement and the grandiose judgment of the other parent, spouse, haughty and arrogant attitude towards them, absence of empathy, cruelty towards them, and they have the splitting pathology. So, so that's your high anger protest behaviors, operationally defined as 5 narcissistic personality traits, an impossible symptom at present. Or actually, excessive anxiety. And now, again, stop the fighting. How do we define excessive anxiety? I defined it as the DSM criteria for a phobic fear. The child has a parent phobia, a mother phobia, or a father phobia, having panic attacks, avoiding the parent, the 3 criteria for a specific phobia in the DSM. Only it's towards a parent. It's not a spider phobia or, fear of clowns or something. It's a fear of your mother, a phobic fear. Now that too is an impossible symptom. If you have a mother phobia or a father phobia, write it up in a journal, because that's going to be the first case ever because the attachment system won't let that happen. Any child who separates from a parent is going to get eaten by a predator. So, brain cells and connections that foster a child's disconnection from a parent were removed from the gene pool. So, so that's symptom 2. It's high anxiety or high anger, excessive protest behavior. The third symptom, though, is the important one, because that's a persecutory delusion in the child. Is there a persecutory delusion? Again, that too is an impossible symptom. Children don't develop persecutory delusions towards normal range parents. Doesn't happen. But that's a symptom feature of the shared persecutory delusion. That's pretty much the only way the child develops a persecutory delusion towards a normal range parent is from the influence of a parent, the lied parent who has a persecutory delusion, the narcissistic, borderline, dark personality parent. So if all 3 of those symptoms are present, there's only one thing that accounts for that. And that is the pathology I describe in Foundations, a narcissistic, borderline, dark personality parent creating a shared delusional disorder and false attachment pathology in the child. So I developed those 3 symptoms into the diagnostic checklist for pathogenic parenting. And it's 2 pages for those 3 symptoms. And on the second page, I put the diagnosis there. So if those 3 symptoms are present, the diagnosis is an adjustment disorder and child psychological abuse. Okay. And because creating a shared delusional disorder and false attachment pathology is child abuse, psychological abuse. Now, in my definitions of them, I was very precise, because I see this as a research measure. I spent 12 years working on a major NIH research project with Keith Nectarline on schizophrenia, and my role was to manage all things data. For longitudinal research project, we had like a 16-hour battery of tests, physiological tests, paper and pencil tests, interview tests, and that we administered across several days. And then I managed all aspects of data and data processing and things like that. And so I am very familiar with research and the ins and outs of research. And so I created a research instrument, basically, because we don't have research over here, and we need research over here. First thing I did when I got into the family courts is I came over here to, I started looking at the research literature. I said, what's the um, reliability, the inter-rater reliability for the child custody evaluations? Nothing. There's no research on inter-rater reliability. If it's not reliable, it can't be valid. And so it's not a valid assessment of anything. I look for research on how do you define parental alienation. There's no research on anything, because we can't define what it is. How can we say we're doing research on parental alienation when people say, well, no, there's no such thing as parental alienation, and well, what's your definition of it? And it's just a nightmare. By creating a standardized definition for it, we can now say the child has, the pathology based on this criteria. And so we can now define what the pathology is and begin to conduct research on it. So that's why it's more verbiage on each one of these, because I'm being very precise for the operational definition of the independent variable on this. But basically, the three symptoms are easy peasy. Write them on a napkin. We just need them answered by the mental health person. Is the child rejecting a normal range parent? What's a normal range parent? Parenting Practices Rating Scale will answer that. Is a child rejecting a normal range parent? Does a child have 5 narcissistic personality traits? These 5 specific ones. Does the child have a specific phobia towards a normal range parent? And is there a persecutory delusion? Is the child's belief that they are being malevolently treated in some way, is that true or false? And if false, how false? That's a persecutory delusion. And so we need those questions answered. They're diagnostic questions. Before we come up with a treatment plan, we need to know what the diagnosis is. The treatment for cancer is different than the treatment for diabetes. So are we treating cancer or diabetes? We need a diagnosis, and we need an accurate diagnosis. Because if we treat cancer with insulin, the patient's going to die from the misdiagnosed cancer. So is there a shared persecutory delusion? Now, about 2018 or so, I started asking parents to go get this, give this to your mental health person and say, can you please complete this for me? Because if you give me these 2 forms, this one and the Parenting Practices Rating Scale, if you put these 2 together, I can tell you pretty much what the diagnosis is, because you got a normal range parent, and these are impossible symptoms created by a normal range parent, so there's only one thing. So, yeah, everybody should be doing this routinely, just giving a checklist. Check, check, check. Child rejecting normal range parent, narcissistic traits, check, check, check. Delusional disorder, check. Normal range parent, level 3, level 4, check, check. Boom. All of a sudden we have documented information about what the mental health people's opinions are on this situation. If you want to disagree with what they checked off, and argue with them and ask for examples, and we can get a second opinion on it. But at least we have clarity, and people can stop fighting about what the symptoms are. Now, when I asked parents to do that, to collect this information, the reports I was getting back was that the involved mental health people were retaliating. They were using their positions of power with the court to then denigrate the targeted parent as being too assertive, as not being cooperative, and various things. And so they were harming the patient who asks for the symptoms of their child. That should never, ever, ever happen. So many things should never, ever happen over here that are happening. Mental health people are the worst imaginable, and we need outside and independent review. Forensic psychology should not be reviewing themselves. We need outside and independent review of what's happening in the family courts. But now, I couldn't protect you back then because I wasn't in the family courts. I wasn't in the position I am now. But so I stopped asking people. And so you haven't heard me talking about this very much over the last couple of years. I've been more grounding in the delusional disorder and the diagnostic issues involved, the child abuse issues involved. But I'm going to be bringing this back up again because it should be just routinely done. 3 diagnostic indicators this. Even if you don't agree with Dr. Childress, do it anyway. You're a mental health professional. You think Dr. Childress is entirely wrong. I don't care. Do this anyway. Let's see what it comes back as. And so I'll be bringing that forward now because I am in the family courts and I am reviewing custody reports and mental health reports, and so I will be to some extent able to protect at least some of you from retaliation. And if I can protect some of you, then all of a sudden I can protect a lot of you because it'll start to spread out. One of the features that I believe needs to happen is that parents need to become educated mental health consumers of mental health services, and parents need to start asserting their rights, their rights under the ethics code, and their legal rights relative to getting information about their child. And if the mental health people are ignorant and incompetent in violation of ethical code standards, then they need to be held accountable. Because otherwise they're just going to do it to the next parent in, the next parent in, the next parent in. We need accountability from the mental health people over here to raise the standards of practice at least up to the APA ethics code. That standard 2.04, that they apply the established knowledge of professional psychology, and standard 2.01, that they know the knowledge of professional psychology, attachment pathology, delusional disorders, personality disorders, and then they apply it to reach an accurate diagnosis and effective treatment plan. So those resources, I put them up on my consulting website in the mental health section. So there's 2 primary sections that I look at, which would be the attorney section and the mental health section. I'm mostly working out of the attorney section. And there's handouts over there. There's a handout that you might find helpful on that describes the pathology. There's a handout over on my attorney resource page that talks about my specialized expertise. There's one like that. But there's another handout that talks about risk assessments for possible child abuse. And that you might find a helpful handout as well in passing out to people. Then over on the mental health resources, that's more for the mental health professional. So you can give them that. You can give the mental health person, say, can you please go look at this mental health resources on Dr. Childress' site? And if they do, on the page itself, I describe a lot of the pathology and a lot of the professional issues. And then I provide these tools, rating or checklist kind of tools for them to use to help with them. Because the assessment for a shared persecutory delusion or for delusional thought disorder pathology is a mental status exam of thought and perception, which is hard to do and takes some training. I was trained for 12 years at UCLA with schizophrenia on doing a mental status exam for thought and perception for delusional thought disorders. But if you're not working with delusional thought disorders, which is schizophrenia basically, maybe bipolar disorder, but if you're not in that domain of pathology, you don't know how to assess for a delusional thought disorder because they don't show up in ADHD or autism or depression or anxiety, panic attacks and stuff. You don't get delusional thought disorders. So the people who know delusional thought disorders are in schizophrenia and not the family courts, and they don't know attachment pathology or a bunch of stuff. So knowing that none of the mental health professionals in the family courts are competent in the assessment of delusional thought disorders, none of them. They're all in violation of 2.01 boundaries of competence. All of them. and they don't care. They're lazy. They're not making an effort to acquire that knowledge about delusional thought disorder. That's where I gave them the three diagnostic indicators and the parenting practices rating scale to help with that. Give them a broader symptom context that they can look at to reassure themselves about the diagnosis. In addition, something I want to share or talk about is on page 3 of the diagnostic checklist. On page 3, I came up with these associated clinical signs. Now, everything else about this pathology, all my other descriptions, none of that is Dr. Childress, because we need to get away from fighting. So I'm not using any of my professional knowledge. I'm like working with both hands tied behind my back. I'm not able to talk about the neurodevelopmental stuff or a lot of stuff because I have to rely only on the knowledge that's readily available. So I applied family systems, attachment, delusional thought disorders, personality pathology. None of that is Dr. Childress. The associated clinical signs are entirely Dr. Childress. Because I know the pathology so well, there are certain patterns, certain feature patterns that show up repeatedly, and so I identified what they were. They're not always present, but they're often present. And I think they're good indicators. The diagnostic indicators are the ones you use for the diagnosis. The associated clinical signs are support. And they're support, and you can also, as they're coming through your practice as a mental health professional, if you hear some of these, it alerts you, oh, am I possibly dealing with this pathology, the shared delusional disorder? So I want to run down these for you. So the first one, ACS1, is the use of the word forced. And each one of these comes from a domain or knowledge, applied knowledge. And the use of the word forced has to do with, this is a transgenerational trauma. And so that was the pattern within the narcissistic borderline personality pathology regarding their own unresolved child abuse. The child was forced to submit. It's very characteristic of sex abuse, that forced to submit. So you get this word coming out of their own patterns. We shouldn't force the child to be with the other parent. What can I do? I can't force the child to be in the car. The other feature, though, about this that I make it number 1 is that it's very manipulative, because the use of the word forced automatically implies that there's something bad about that parent. We have to force the child to be with this bad parent. And so it's implying there's a problem. No, there's no problem. The child isn't being forced to be with a parent. The child is being given an opportunity to bond to both parents and to love and receive the love from both parents. The child's being given an opportunity. But it's a manipulative use of the word forced to disempower our ability to move the child into therapy. That we should not try to resolve the child's detachment. We shouldn't force the child into that. And so that's a very characteristic symptom. Whenever you hear the word force, your radar should go up. Then number 2 is enhancing the child's empowerment to reject the other parent. So first, the pathological parent controls the child, gets psychological control over the child and manipulation. Once they feel comfortable that they're controlling the child, then they empower the child's rejection of the parent. Oh, we should listen to the child, and the child should be allowed to decide on what the visitation schedule is. And so it's that controlling the child and then empowering the child to reject the other parent. That's the characteristic of the cross-generational coalition. When you have a cross-generational coalition, the phrase, what can I do? I can't, it's the child with the other parent. There's nothing, what can I do? It's that presentation of selective helplessness. It's number 2. Number three is the exclusion demand. That's where the child says, I don't want my parent at my sporting event, my graduation ceremony, my recital, my event. This is very, very characteristic of this pathology. If ACS3, the exclusion demand, is present, the pathology is almost certainly 100% present. All the other symptoms, features are going to be there because this never shows up anywhere else except here, except with this. And what it is the child is not, doesn't have a problem with the parents showing up. Children love friends, family coming to their events, and they're watching them play soccer or coming to their, graduation ceremonies and stuff. They love that, love the attention. It's the allied parent who gets distressed and dysregulated. When the targeted parent shows up, the allied parent starts to go all emotional, and the child is a regulatory object for that parent. So now this parent is all chaotic, and the child is having to regulate this parent, but now the child's distracted from their event, from their play, from their recital, whatever it is. The child's distracted by trying to keep this pathological parent in an organized state. And then this parent wants the child to say, no, exclude the other parent. Now I feel better. So it's the use of the child as a regulatory object. It's the parent who's excluding the other parent from the situation. Exclusion demand. Number four, parental replacement. Also highly diagnostic of this pathology. You see it nowhere else. And if ACS4 is there, I can pretty much guarantee you everything else is going to be there as well, which is parental replacement. That's when the child calls their biological or their parent, their authentic parent, by their first name, Mary or Tom or something. And so they de-own their authentic parent and they stop using mom and dad to refer to them, or they start calling a step parent of the narcissistic borderline as mom or dad. That replacing of people, very characteristic of narcissistic pathology. Once I'm done with you, people are replaceable and not at all characteristic of a child's attachment system. So 3 and 4, if present, are pretty diagnostic. They're not always present, though. Number 5 is the unforgivable event. That has to do with splitting. Things once defined do not change. And because the child is being forced, compelled, psychologically controlled and manipulated into rejecting the other parent for no reason, no valid reason, that they need to come up with some reason for the people say, why don't you want to be with your mom? Or why don't you want to be with your... The child has to come up with a reason. So they come up with this past event. Some situation emerged that is absolutely unforgivable and justifies all current and future rejection. When they tell that unforgivable event to the allied parent as they're working out the storyline kind of, and they say, well, I don't want to be with mom because she's too controlling, or I don't want to be with dad, he has anger management problems, something like that. The other parent, the allied parent, believes that and says, yes, oh, I know, they were just like that with me and so I know, oh, you poor thing. And so that gets accepted. And so the child learns that if they offer this reason, it will be an accepted reason. It's not a valid reason. That's just, no. Breaches happen because of what's going on currently, not because of what happened 3, 4, 5 years ago, or 6 months ago. Conflict happens in the moment because it's being cued by the moment. The implication is, oh, there's some sort of PTSD the child can't get over. No PTSD. There's no PTSD. We'll do a differential diagnosis on the PTSD. What was the trauma exposed to? Now, potentially the child was exposed to trauma. Targeted parents can be abusive. There are abusive parents out there. And so if the child is being abused, let's identify it, parenting practice rating scale, put it on a treatment plan and fix it. But if there's no abusive parenting, there's no PTSD because there's no trauma. PTSD. Criterion A. First criteria of PTSD is exposure or threatened exposure to death, serious injury, or sexual violence. So if the child hasn't been exposed to death, serious injury or sexual violence by the targeted parent, there's no trauma that would create PTSD. You can't have PTSD if you don't have a trauma. Complex trauma doesn't produce PTSD. It produces a different version of it. It doesn't produce the type of thing where a child's going to reject the parent forever. So that unforgivable event, very characteristic of the pathology. The child calling the targeted parent fake or a liar, okay? Using those words. So using the word forced, using the word fake or liar. And that's because the child wants to bond to that parent. The child's attachment system, everything about the child's attachment system wants to bond to that parent, but the child is not. And when the targeted parent provides the child with love and affection, the child wants to bond more, but they can't. So they have to discount the reality and authenticity of that love from the targeted parent, because otherwise they won't have the strength to be able to reject them. They're just going to fall in and love the parent. So in order to do that, they have to say they're liar, they're fake. So you get that word. Then ACS-7 is a bunch of themes for the rejection. And these are just common themes that are used, sort of generic. Why are you rejecting the other parents, the target parents, too controlling? There's anger management issues. They don't take responsibility or apologize. They need to apologize for what they did wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. But you'll hear the child asking for an apology. That's the spouse. These are all spousal issues by the child. The allied parent, the pathological parent, thinks the normal range parent was too controlling because they tried to limit their symptoms. They thought they had anger management problems because they were provoking him into the anger. You have anger management problems. No, you have a borderline personality pathology. Or a new romantic relationship by the targeted parent. And the child says, I don't get enough one-on-one time with my parents, so I don't want to be with them at all because they have a new girlfriend or something. No, children don't react that way. Children like new spouses. It's entirely different relationship, spousal relationship versus parent-child. They don't become jealous of these things. Prior neglect by the child. Oh, this is classic. They say, well, before the divorce, the dad wasn't involved with the child, and so therefore they shouldn't have any future involvement with the child. It's like, no, if they didn't have much involvement, they had it before the divorce, then let's give them a lot of time after. We don't separate people. Creating attachment pathology is not a solution to anything. Vague personhood of the targeted parent. I don't know, it's just something about them. They're just irritating because there is nothing about them, but they have to come up with some reason. The non-forgivable grudge, that's the unforgivable event. For some reason, something past happened and I can never. And interestingly, not feeding the child. You'll hear that come up sometimes. It has to do with love and food kind of being connected. But the allied parent will send food over to the targeted parent, send the child over with food because they don't think they're being fed right. Or there'll be complaints about something about the feeding of the child over at the targeted parent's house. ACS, unwarranted use of the word abuse. All abuse allegations should be properly investigated. All of them should be properly investigated. If, however, there's no abuse there, then that's potentially a borderline personality pathology. Because borderline personality pathology, everything is abusive. They just run to that word for any emotional distress. They perceive it as abuse. And they will make that allegation of abuse, and that backs people off to a certain degree, but it also draws resources of manipulating people to come and be nurturing for you. Oh, I'm this poor abused person, when they're not abused. Normal range people do not use the word abuse if there's no abuse. They use, you're irritating, you're annoying, you're an idiot. They can use a lot of different words, but they typically don't use the word abuse unless there's abuse. So that's a borderline personality symptom potentially. Excessive texting, phone calls while at the other parent's house. Again, very classic, where the child goes over to be with the dad, the targeted parent dad, and mom is sending out text messages, and they're texting all the time, and the child's up in their room, or emails and various things. All of that's done to disrupt the child's capacity to bond to the targeted parent, because that's the ultimate fear, is if the child has a bonded relationship with the targeted parent, the healthy parent, then they won't love the pathological parent. That's the parent's fear, because of splitting. It's going to be either you or me. And so when they're with you, I have to disrupt their ability for you to bond to them, as anxiety management for me. ACS 10, role reversal, use of the child. It's not me, it's the child who doesn't want to take the phone call. It's not me, it's the child who wants to go to private school. It's not me, it's the child who wants to take, music lessons. And so they put the child out front, that it's supposedly the child's independent wishes. Once they get psychological control of the child, Barbara, then they just use the child manipulatively to get what they want in the world. They put the child out in front. So that's role reversal, use of the child. Very destructive relationship, role reversal. Then ACS 11, the targeted parent deserves to be rejected. That's the spousal abuse theme. Yeah, of course I hit her because she deserved it. People deserve cruelty if they displease us. And that's not the actual value system. The true value system is we're not nice to other people because of who they are. We're nice because of who we are. So that's the authentic value. But for a narcissistic value, it's okay to be cruel to people if they deserve it. So that's number 11. When we see that one, then we have a high spousal abuse feature to this. And we almost always see that one. This is a spousal abuse pathology, spousal psychological abuse, using the child as a weapon. And in weaponizing the child, they create such pathology in the child that becomes child psychological abuse. But this is a spousal abuse pathology that's driving it. And then number 12 is the disregard of court authority and court orders. Because narcissistic and borderline, they can't. Narcissist feels entitled to disregard them, and borderlines cannot manage to contain themselves to structure and limits. And we have the dark personalities, dark triad, vulnerable dark triad, and dark tetrad. And when you're in the dark zones, that's really evil. That's psychopathy, that's narcissistic, and Machiavellian manipulation. So just manipulation that is off the chart manipulation. And that's associated into the factitious disorder imposed on another. So all of these forms are up on the mental health section of my consulting website. And I would suggest that you start giving these to your involved mental health people and say, can you, Dr. Childress suggests we complete this. Can you please complete this for me? The ACS, the Associated Clinical Science, just a little thing coming down the pipe, is Dorsey Pruder and her Conscious Co-Parenting Institute, the custody resolution method that she developed, which is a qualitative research methodology called content analysis that uses data coding to code frequencies of various categories of interest. Well, she codes for, or tags for, the diagnostic indicators and associated clinical signs, and then puts all that data together and the timelines and everything that parents can present to the court to make the argument that this parent is creating significant pathology in the child, a shared delusional disorder. And so she's been tagging these data from around families for a number of years now, using a custody resolution method. So she has data regarding the prevalence of these symptoms in the family court, in family court conflict. And we got the data, and we're going to be generating a paper on the associated clinical signs, on the frequency, the prevalence of the 12 associated clinical signs in the family courts. And my initial hypothesis, we'd see at least four or more of them in every situation where the three diagnostic indicators, we'll see at least four, and where the three diagnostic indicators are present, the each one of them will have a 50% or higher probability prevalence rate in the data. The data actually came back stronger than that. At least five were present in all 42 families or something. At least five ACS were also present, but mostly it was up in the 9 range, 8, 9, 10 range. We had like 80% or something up in that zone. So they show up frequently. I think we had 3 of them that were there 100% of the time. And a couple more that were just in there 90% of the time. Forced, I was interested in that. It was only 80%, 86% or something. I thought it would be a little bit higher than that. The lowest was the texting one, with about 30% of the families had the excessive texting. Now, one of my guesses, though, is that this is all based on documented data, so written court reports and mental health reports and stuff. I think if it was actually conducted by a clinical interview, I think the prevalence rate would go up a lot with these symptoms. So just so you're aware, I would suggest start noting these down, because these don't show up in any other pathology. And if they're showing up here with a high degree of frequency, and you've got a child rejecting a normal range parent and 5 narcissistic traits and a persecutory delusion, you're looking at the pathology. That's diagnostic. And so the reason I came up with these forms is to assist the mental health people, because they're not competent. You can make the diagnosis on any one of those 3 diagnostic indicators. The attachment pathology, I know the attachment system well enough. I can diagnose that this is a false attachment pathology imposed on the child, factitious disorder imposed on another, just by the attachment system display. But look at the shared persecutory delusion. Do a mental status exam and thought perception there, but there's a shared delusional disorder. And so now I got a shared delusional disorder and the attachment pathology. And, there's my 5 narcissistic personality traits. There it is. It's all there. The final thing I want to just talk about today, before running off, is the other form, which is the parent-child relationship rating scale. This is an outcome measure that I suggest all treatment providers use. And this is daily ratings from the targeted parent, and on 3 items: affection, cooperation, social involvement. It's a 1 to 7 scale. So 1 and 2 are awful, 6 and 7 is wonderful, 3, 4, 5 is normal. We just want the child in the 3, 4, 5 range, normal range. And this would be the outcome measure used to monitor treatment progress and goal accomplishments, and it has a wide variety of uses. And what I suggest is the targeted parent rate the child every day around bedtime. You can talk with the child and say, wow, okay, well, we have, and we're looking hopefully normal range, but however they are. And then email 3 numbers to the family therapist, 5, 4, 5. And that's affection, cooperation, social involvement. And they put them in an Excel file, and they can just track that. And it can be used in a lot of helpful ways going forward. So all of these are simply data documentation instruments so that we can end the fighting around these children. We have to bring the fighting to a close. So let's get clarity on what the symptoms are. Let's get an accurate diagnosis of which parent is abusing the child, put it on a treatment plan, and fix it to return to these children a normal range and healthy childhood, rather than a childhood caught in conflict. The targeted parent cannot let go of the conflict because the child is being abused by the allied parent, by the pathological parent. So it is the obligation of the targeted parent to continue to fight to protect the child. The narcissistic borderline parent is going to continue to fight to create the pathology in the child to meet their own emotional needs. And so we got this constant conflict, and neither parent can back off of it. One because they're pathological, the other because they're normal and protecting their child. The mental health people need to come in, get clarity on the situation, get an accurate diagnosis, put it on an effective treatment plan, and fix it. We can't. This is unacceptable. What's happening in the family courts and allowing these children's lives to be destroyed, allowing the lives of the parents to be destroyed. And so those are the resources. Some resources that are up on my consulting website, drchildress-consulting.com. You can direct the mental health people to the mental health resources. You can direct your attorneys over to the attorney resources, and you'll probably find some of the resources useful in advocating for your children with the mental health people. But just be careful. The mental health people are not good people, at least not the ones around you right now. So they're the lowest quality ever. They're not good people. So you be careful, and we'll talk with you next week.